at the Hamid Karzai International Airport in Kabul on August 31st, described as the final American paratrooper to depart Afghanistan. But there may be a problem. During the last hours of the evacuation, according to troops under Major General Donohue's command, and documented by photographs and witness statements, Donohue ordered all of the passengers aboard that C-17 transport plane to disembark so he could have a souvenir loaded onto the plane. The souvenir, war trophy, one might say, was an inoperable Taliban-owned Toyota Hilux with a fully operational Russian Zu-23 anti-aircraft autocannon mounted in the bed. Once the Helix was loaded, passengers were allowed back on the plane, but there wasn't room for as many that were on the plane previously. According to troops at the scene, at least 50 and perhaps as many as 100 people were left at the airport in Kabul to make room for the Helix.
Oh, that is so sad. What are you going to...
Well, it's more than sad. That's a problem if that's true. Why don't we start there in as part of our larger discussion about Afghanistan, particularly after all the generals testified before Congress last week. Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano joins us now, Vice President of the Catherine and Shelby Cullom Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation, and his latest book, Brutal War, Jungle Fighting in Papua New Guinea, 1942. Jim, thanks for joining us. What of Major General Donovan?
Well, I saw that story on Twitter, and that's the kind of thing where I think we just have to wait for the investigation, the facts to come out. I mean, generals get investigated all the time, usually by the Inspector General, which is, and they actually have a special office in the Inspector General for investigating generals. So I'm sure if this guy did something wrong, he will, because this is so high profile, and the facts are probably pretty easy to prove one way or another. But that if he did something wrong, he'll be held accountable.
Fair enough. But I mean, just so we understand the rules of the game here, if what is being alleged is true, that is a major offense, is it not?
Well, yeah, I'm not going to speculate because let's just see what the facts are and what the context is. Putting up the hearing, which now seems 1,000 years ago, and it is, I do think the White House is right in one perspective, in that the sense that their strategy was just wait this out and the news cycle would move on, and I do think that they're right on that. I mean, I don't think that the hearings really got the attention they deserved. Of course, the problem with the administration is they left such a mess in Afghanistan. There's going to be more advantages in the future. So just waiting for the news cycle to go on may not work for them. But what I think is important about the hearings is, and we didn't actually learn that much, is, and I'm not sure there's really kind of three baskets of failures. One is what the president did. What the president did was make a lot of really bad decisions that caused a lot of harm and suffering and sacrifice to U.S. national interest. That's all on him. And I think even though all the dots weren't necessarily connected in the hearing, I think that's incontrovertible. The second failure is the generals. And look, everybody understands that you want to be able for the president and his military advisors to speak in trust and confidence. We get that, right? So they can be frank and candid and everything else. But on the other side, what they are not there to do is essentially to provide political cover for the president and his political decisions. And I really think they failed to do that balance in the hearings and just in general. I don't think they're competent. I don't think they've served this country well. And I don't think they helped the American people really understand what happened in Afghanistan.
Well, General McKenzie said that he advised President Biden to leave 2,500 troops in Afghanistan. Biden doesn't recall that. So either their line under oath or Biden's line. Who is it?
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing, the kind of evidence we really didn't get in the hearing is we really don't have a timeline. We really don't have the context. We really don't have who talked to who when. So we really don't have the connect the dots to really, demonstrate, because they could say, well, I told the president. Well, I didn't tell the president. I told the SecDef and so who knows, right? And that's the third failure, which is, look, the Congress really failed to do its job. These hearings did not provide the kind of evidence to really understand what happened, why it happened, where we are and where we go from here. I really do think we need an independent commission for that. But, there was bipartisan kind of frustration with what happened in Afghanistan, but there was very, very partisan efforts to kind of put accountability. And the result of that is we never really got to, well, here's exactly what happened. Here's the timeline. Here's the context of all the conversations. And so there's a lot that was left unsaid.
Well, I agree with all of that regarding the postmortem, but then there's also the urgency of now, to borrow a favorite phrase of the left. And the now is, do we yet have a handle on Americans trying to get out, legal permanent residents trying to get out, Afghan allies that we want to extract? Do we have a handle on what those numbers are and how we're doing?
No, and it seems that the administration's priority, like a lot of their crisis management, was not about addressing the issue, but kind of getting it off the news cycle so they could go back to focusing on their domestic agenda. I talked to other governments. I talked to people doing this on the ground. The U.S. government still doesn't really have a coherent strategy. They don't have a coherent effort. It does appear that they're continuing to talk to the Taliban, and I think they are cutting deals with the Taliban. But we don't know what kind of deals they're cutting. We don't know what kind of money's being transferred, and we don't know what they're really doing. And I think at this point, even they understand that the Taliban are not redeemable, but they're just trying to buy enough Taliban cooperation to push this problem down the road a bit.
Is there, to your knowledge, are there still private missions happening? And if so, are they getting cooperation from the State Department?
Well, there's absolutely private efforts going on. There's several underground railroads in operation. It's kind of a race between the Taliban shutting them down and those guys getting people out. They're largely funded by private sector people, and there's bribes and stuff like that involved.
Sure.
But the U.S. government doesn't appear to be the big player here.
But I mean, well, right. I mean, they don't need to be a big player. They just need to let maybe some of these special ops retirees and others involved in these private missions that when they were being more public a few weeks ago, do what they do and don't get in their way if they can get people out who need to get out for fear of their life. And that sort of leads to my other question, too, in terms of if you have an American, a legal permanent resident, Afghan allies murdered because of who they are we even going to hear about it here?
Well, we might or might not, but I think that's a big part of the problem, and one of the reasons why this never gets off the news cycle for the administration, which is American hostages are going to become really a coin of the realm. As it's readily apparent that cooperation between the Taliban and Americans and the West isn't really going to work, the value of hostages and hostage taking and trading for things is going to become more important for the Taliban and others. So I think that there's every expectation that, we could see something like that in the future. We just had this story where, Iran asked for $10 billion just to begin the talks with the United States. Look, this isn't a disparagement on culture in that part of the world, but this is the way these people do things. They're very, very transactional, and they trade for things. And if you're going to trade for something, you have to have something to trade. So there's a lot of value in hostage taking, and I still think that's a real possibility.
With respect to China, like scaling up our enemies here, those fighter jets that were over Taiwan over the weekend as, another provocation, another example of saber rattling by the Chi-Coms. What are we to make of their posture with the United States as it relates to Taiwan against the backdrop of what we were just discussing with Afghanistan and with Iran?
Yeah, well, it's really hard to tell from the overflights. Well, I mean, obviously they're for intimidation, and you could say, well, also if you were going to do a precursor to an activity, you would do stuff like the Russians do this all the time. You do exercises, and then one day you just show up and don't leave. So could there be a bit of both in that? And the answer is, sure, absolutely. China's not having a good day right now. They've got internal economic issues. They've got real energy shortages. The kind of the trite line that external events, trying to use distract from things, and that could be a possibility as well. So it's a real issue. I will say, one of the areas where this administration is actually pretty good is in making reassurances to the Chinese, and I mean to the Taiwanese, and I really do think we have to double down on that. I really think is when the Chinese get aggressive like this, if you back off, that's the worst possible message. When you double down, the Chinese know you're serious, and that raises the stakes for them as well.
And another reason why we shouldn't send American athletes to the Beijing Winter Olympics, which are in a few months.
Yeah,
you think?
It's interesting. I just saw some reporting on it, and I think the Chinese are being very quick because now they're talking about greatly restricting, foreign visitors to the game, and one obvious reason for that is that diminishes the value of boycotts, right? If foreign people and dignitaries can't come to the games, and the Chinese aren't embarrassed by the boycotts. So I don't think anybody is going to be up for an athlete boycott of the Olympic Games. But look, I think the issue with China just gets bigger and bigger and bigger every day. And if I would fault the administration, among the other things I would really fault for them is they're behind the American people on this issue. And the American people want, substantive action. Actually, today, we're likely to get the U.S. economic plan, the trade plan for dealing with China. And actually, most of the reporting suggests it's going to look kind of more like the Biden trade plan, which is kind of following with the threat of tariffs and other things, which is
the Trump trade
quo.
plan?
The Trump, right? Yeah, sorry. And that's kind of the status quo. Is people are looking, well, where's your plan? How are we moving forward on China within this administration? And we're not getting that.
Well, and one particular asset of Taiwan, and potentially under threat by the Chinese communists, against the backdrop of a semiconductor chip shortage in this world right now, and with automobiles and all electronics. You've got Taiwan Semiconductor, which is the largest semiconductor chip manufacturer in the world, and what the Chinese communists could potentially do to make the supply of chips in the United States even slower than it is at present?
Yeah, and I think that's one reason why we're looking at diversity, and I think there's going to be a lot of movement and cooperation on that. But it's also another reason why you really want to double down on your support of Taiwan. I think that level of overflight actually, we got a statement from the State Department, kind of finger waving, wasn't even signed by Blinken, I believe. That level of military activity really kind of calls for a U.S. response. It's not inappropriate for something like that to send a U.S. carrier over there. That just sends the kind of signal that shows we're really serious.
He is Lieutenant Colonel Jim Carafano, Vice President, Catherine Shelby Cullum Davis Institute for International Studies at the Heritage Foundation. The book, Brutal War, Jungle Fighting in Papua New Guinea, 1942. Jim, thanks as always.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Remember the kids' game Telephone? The teacher would whisper in the first kid's ear, "I have a purple giraffe named Lucy.